From birthing and learning about birth, being at birth, that we can incorporate into our daily life.
Trust. Trust and surrender. So that's definitely something that I was taught. Don't you know, kind of try to figure out and plan and do this or that and, you know, impact the rolling of things that I can't impact. Just lean back and see what happens, and that's what I do, and trust the big universe, because it just usually goes the way it should. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, it's just really nothing teaches that better than the observation of labor and birth. My mom was a midwife, and so I visited her when she was working at the hospital, and I guess that's just when it was implanted. So that was in the 60s, and I was in East Germany. And that's also where I went to do my midwifery program. I moved then to the west of Germany in 1987, which was still before the wall fell. So we came to Canada then, my family and myself. In 2007 was my two sons. Been working in Sooke basically ever since. So I had been working as a midwife in Germany at the hospital, but also in the community, and here it's exclusively community-based. So that was a little bit newer for me, and then the system at the hospital was very different to me. And what also was very different was that the families, especially the women I worked with and for, they were extremely grateful for what we did, because we did really women-centered care as midwives, and that was relatively new in BC, obviously. And so in Sooke, there was no midwife basically for 150 years before me. So I was the first to open a practice here in Sooke, and so that was 2010. We are 4 midwives here now, try to deliver the care that people want and need and shall have. They always are extremely grateful to have a midwife, because we do come on day 1 and 2 and 3 and go basically from one day to another, helping with the breastfeeding, checking the umbilical cord, checking baby's pees and poos, and checking mom's bleeding or any healing, like if she had a C-section or just a repair on her perineum, checking all those things and give them the reassurance, this is fine, I'm gonna see you tomorrow, and then we go from there. So basically that the woman really feels in the center of her own care, like not a number. Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like other communities have as many unplanned home births. And so when you're a minimum 45 minutes away from the hospital, and that's in the middle of the night with no traffic, we always checked people at home before going to the hospital. And there was many times, I'd say about 10% of our births a year ended up being more unplanned home births. So everybody kind of has that in their back of their head, that if things are progressing really quickly and we come and check you, we might be advising you to stay. Uda Harold is family to me. Not by blood, but definitely I've known her for well over a decade. I was one of her first Sooke clients before she was even in Sooke.
My cell phone number actually in the Sooke phone book, so something most people don't even know anymore.
We always laugh about this because there's like Coil phone book put out by the Lions that Uda put an advertisement in for Sooke midwifery.
Crystal looked up under midwives if there's anything in Sooke. That's how she found my number.
When I was found out that I was pregnant with my second, I looked in that little local phone book and found Uda, so I was the first person to ever call her from her ad.
She said, I had a C-section the first time and I want to have a vaginal birth. She had her C-section when she was fully dilated. I said, you've got the best chance of having a VBAC.
You say what VBAC stands for?
The vaginal birth after a C-section. That's what VBAC stands for. Yeah, so 9 months later, we had really, really beautiful VBAC of a very big baby. And Crystal is not a very tall woman. The baby was what we call OP, so sunny side up. Most babies are born by C-sections, and then the doctors always say, your baby would have never been born like that. But Crystal managed to push that baby out. There was over 9 pounds for her, I don't know, 5'4" or what she is. And she was so inspired by her own strengths that she did choose to become a doula after that. So she had her own little kids, obviously. So her oldest was 2, her little one was just born. She had a full-time job and she became a doula and then she became a midwife. So that was all in 2009. And then in 2020, she graduated from the midwifery program and was my very dear colleague for a while until she unfortunately had to move away to Penticton. But
I would not be a midwife without Uda being in my life. My mom actually used to work when she was going to nursing school with like underground midwifery before it was regulated in Alberta. So I got pregnant with my daughter and she said, you should look into a midwife. And I said, no, I'm not having a home birth. And I went with my family GP. And after having my daughter and looking back on it, I definitely wanted to try midwifery with my second and I was more knowledgeable in it. Yeah, it was a completely different eye-opening experience to what birth can be like with somebody who's empowering you and trusts in you and your body. And I didn't feel like I had that really before. You know, there's not even really words to how important she is to me and what she brought to my life.
Why did you choose midwifery as a job?
After having my son with Uda as my midwife, when she was doing home visits with me, she said, you should really look into being a doula. Like you really, the way you were able to handle birth, you should look into that. And I said, yeah, I don't want to have a bunch of women yelling at me. No, thank you. And then within a year later, I was a doula. Really just wanted to keep working with families and working with Uda. I really, at discharge appointment, told her I either need to become a surrogate or a midwife in a joking way. Yeah, here we are, over a decade later, 14 years later, actually.
Then you got to work for the person that delivered your baby, which is kind of unique.
Exactly, and it was all kind of serendipity how it all came together. After having my son, I was a doula in the community while working full-time as a single parent. And it was just kind of, as a doula, you're not medical, you're there for labor supports. And I was just seeing there was a need for sure for midwifery, more midwives in Sooke, and also just the level of care and trust that people are getting put into their bodies when they're in midwifery care, and just some outcomes that I saw with some different practitioners that I was like, I need more of an advocating voice in the medical field. And so that was kind of my push. And after doing what I did with the delivery of my son, I was like, well, if I can push out a 9-pound baby after getting told I'd never be able to do it, I can go to UBC University with 2 little kids. And I did, and it was, looking back on it, I don't really know how I did it, but we're here, and we did it.
That's remarkable. What did births in Sooke look like?
Births in Sooke are really interesting, especially now that I'm out of that community and looking at it. I don't feel like other communities have as many unplanned home births.
How differently it worked here. In Germany, there are more birth centers. So birth centers basically in every town and city anyways. Probably something that we're also gonna have here one fine day. So we're kind of moving into that direction. Especially here in BC and on the island, the older midwives are usually trained long time ago, sometimes out of the country, well, most of the time out of the country, somewhere where midwifery has existed for a long time, and they just obviously adopted or adapted more kind of conservative care.
It's kind of vintage, right? It's come back into fashion for sure in the last 10 years. We're really seeing an increase in families, and it's word of mouth. And it was something pre-regulation, and understandably so, that the medical community was a bit leery letting midwifery in, because at the time it wasn't regulated. And I think a lot of families are coming back to this because the medical system as we're seeing it right now is in crisis. A lot of people have virtual doctors, don't have a doctor, don't have a continuity of care at all. Whereas with midwifery, you're getting a bit more of that. You're usually smaller teams in some, especially rural settings. You're usually a lot of smaller teams, but you also know the safety of that person being well trained. I don't see midwifery going anywhere. I see it transforming into like how it is now, larger teams, larger collaborative care centers, which is great. But I do see less and less UDAs. I think the way society's moving now too, it will be accepted because people won't know what they're missing out on with that solo care.
And why won't they know about it?
Because it's just being eliminated.
The midwifery program here in BC started in 2002. There are just now older midwives too, meanwhile. The younger midwives definitely bring a little bit more medical aspect into the care. And that's probably the biggest difference between younger and older midwives. Is pregnancy and birth something medical? Or is it something natural that at times may need medical intervention? Then you have to watch it and implement it when needed, implement it when you are afraid of something. But I mean, I don't know if I was that relaxed and trustful when I was on my first 5 years of midwifery, like that comes with age, I guess.
Uda still works as a solo midwife. She is the only person seeing her families, delivering those babies. She is there from the minute they make that first call to the clinic until they're discharged. The work-life balance, there isn't one when you're a solo midwife, unless you're completely off, which Uda does take a month or two a year where she is completely off. But the rest of the time, you're on 24/7, 7 days a week.
Practice that way.
Mm-hmm. I think it really was the passion, right? And then most of Jane Baker and Uda and some of these midwives who've been doing this for years and were part of regulation, they are Spitfire midwives, man. They are out for their people and to protect that continuity and to kind of safeguard their people as much as possible. And they're just feisty midwives, they were there, Uda's got tons of stories from back in Germany and protests and things like that. And so just listening to them for a little bit and, absorbing some of that vibe from them, women's rights was so important to them, and seeing midwifery pushed through, because before it was really a passion. They were barely making any money, if they were making money at all. It was just that they were wanting people to be supported in birth in their own setting that they chose, and rather than free birthing, at least having somebody with some skills there for safety and for support really was 100%. And I think all of us that are doing it, you have to have passion for it, doing this even now in this setting. Most people getting into midwifery now aren't interested in that type of lifestyle. We're seeing less and less people having babies in their early 20s and more in their 30s, early 30s, late 30s. As we're seeing that, I think we're seeing increases in high blood pressure and diabetes and all sorts of different things that put people at a little bit of a higher risk and more interventions with their deliveries and their pregnancy.
So if I had to tell the next generation of midwives something from my heart, then it would be every birth, and it never stops, gives you some feedback, and the good feedbacks are good and the bad feedbacks are even better.
I'll give this advice, but it's still advice stolen from Uda. And that is that you're here to learn and not to know. She still practices that to this day for herself also, that just observe, sit patiently and wait. And we always want to think that we're needing to do something. And a lot of the time doing nothing is actually the right answer.
To learn, keep learning, keep growing, be trustful, passionate, and patient.